roasting of an ox, are drifting across the marketplace, where she is due to arrive at any moment now from Broadland, the home of Lord Louis Mountbatten, just away across there where the tall poplars run along the side of the new road, and they've only a short drive to come from this very gracious Hampshire house, where Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh spent, in fact, a portion of their honeymoon. As you can hear the bells playing in the background, the Guard of Honour of the Royal Hampshire Regiment drawn up there on parade, and all the way along, extremely orderly behind their ropes, the people of this tiny borough. Only about 6,000 people, in fact, in it, but almost all of them here today, so that all the other streets away from the route are cold and cool and empty. The cars to come along the narrow streets, and they are narrow indeed, behind these tall houses with their very mellow red tiles, and just this town an island of those comfortable red houses in all this rich green of Hampshire, and now, though early in April, out in all its gayest blossom. Along there at Broadlands, even from here, we can see the bright white of the cherry blossom that makes such a gay entrance to the town. And here in the town, all the little back gardens gay with pear blossom and apple blossom and flowers earlier than we dared have hoped for this very special spring occasion. The hills blocking off nearby Winchester away to my left, nearby Southampton off to my right, and around at our back the Test, that silver stream, so famous, one of the most famous rivers of England for its fishing, which at one time made the small blue that the huts have been selling on the street. And as I say, this strange, almost barbaric effect of the smoke drifting across the market square from the bonfire, as here comes the royal car, pulling down now into the marketplace. It checks the Union Jack on its roof as it pulls into the square, and as we go over for his commentary at closer quarters to Tom Salmon in Bank House.
And here in the marketplace, you join the people of Romsey roaring out their welcome to Her Majesty and the Duke. Her Majesty and the Duke, who are accompanied by the Countess Mountbatten of Burma, are being received by the Lord Lieutenant of the County, the Duke of Wellington, the High Steward of Romsey, the Earl Mountbatten of Burma, whose office dates back to the very charter that's being celebrated here today, the Mayor of Romsey, Councillor Mackerel, the High Sheriff of Hampshire, Captain Corriton, and by the General Officer Commanding-in-Chief Southern Command, Sir George Erskine. Salute then from the Royal Hampshire Regiment, drawn up here on one side of this square which is richly decorated this morning. It's as if today the streets of the town were rivers of color converging here to make this marketplace a reservoir of reds, blues, and golds. It's crowded with people, and now Her Majesty and the Duke stand in front of this impressive Guard of Honor, a Guard of Honor of 100 men. And now Her Majesty begins an inspection of the Guard of Honor. 100 men proudly wearing the badge which bears the Royal Rose, initially awarded to the Hampshire Archers at the Battle of Agincourt. There can be few regiments in the British Army with a finer record of service than that of the Royal Hampshires. It's a regiment that's won 10 Victoria Crosses, 4 of them on a single day before breakfast. During the Great War, the regiment raised 36 battalions, and in the last war, they served in every theatre of operations except Burma. And it was, in fact, because of their outstanding battle record then that they were granted the title of Royal. And many of the men on parade here today are men who helped to earn that honor. And as territorials, they wear the campaign ribbons of North Africa, Italy, and Western Europe. Others on parade here today were serving only a few years ago in Malaya. Some of the others, because this is a cross-section of the county regiment, some of the others are men with only 10 weeks' service in the army. Down below me here is one of the regimental bands plays "The People of Romsey Wait for Her Majesty to Walk Towards the Decorated Dais outside the Town Hall." And now the inspection is over. Her Majesty has joined the Duke once more, and together they walk towards the decorated dais, from which in a few moments' time the mayor will read the loyal address and Her Majesty will reply. At the foot of the dais, the mayor presents the mayoress, Mrs. Mackerel, the deputy mayor, Alderman Allen, and the town clerk, Mr. Holmes. Her Majesty is wearing a cherry red close-fitting velvet coat with a fur collar, with a close-fitting cherry red velvet hat with small feathers in it. And now she walks past the mace bearer up the steps onto the dais. And behind the dais, grouped under a canopy, are mayors and town clerks, mayoresses, civic dignitaries from many of the towns of Hampshire. The royal party take their place on the dais, and the people of Romsey, in a spontaneous demonstration of their loyalty and affection, break through the ropes which were keeping them back when the Queen arrived. They break through, and now there isn't a space to be seen below me here in the marketplace. The Union Jacks are waving all around this marketplace in the windows. People are looking out and cheering, and many of those people, I noticed, are elderly people. And I noticed, too, that most of the people who've got the front seats, as it were, for this royal occasion are the children. And now, on the dais, the Mayor of Romsey steps forward to read the loyal address.
May it please your Majesty, we, the Mayor, Aldermen, and Burgesses of the Borough of Romsey, do humbly desire to offer to your Majesty and to your Royal Highness a loyal and dutiful welcome to this borough. We are deeply conscious of the honor conferred upon us by your gracious presence here today, and we wish to assure you not only of our loyalty, but also of our affectionate regard. We recall with gratitude favors conferred upon Romsey in the past, and particularly the granting of charters to the borough by your Majesty's royal predecessors, King James I and King William III. And we look to the future with confidence and determination that our borough will use to the best advantage the powers entrusted to it. We hope that your Majesty and your Royal Highness will keep happy memories of an occasion which will not only be a landmark in the annals of our borough, but will be treasured in our hearts always. We do earnestly pray that God may bless your Majesty and your Royal Highness in all your undertakings, knowing as we do your devotion to the welfare of this realm of England, which we all love and which you cherish with such affection.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the loyal and affectionate terms of the address of the Borough of Romsey, and for the warmth of the welcome with which you have received me and my husband. It is always a real pleasure to both of us to visit Romsey, a place of which we have the most happy memories. We are especially pleased to be with you when you are celebrating the 350th anniversary of the grant of your Charter of Incorporation. And we look forward to joining with you in the service of Thanksgiving on this occasion in your ancient abbey, where we have so often worshipped. The stream of history has quietly flowed through your town, and its course has been marked by a long tradition of good management of the affairs of the borough, in which the corporation may take very proper pride. Against this background, Mr. Mayor, you and your colleagues can confidently survey the years to come, and I am sure that it will ever be your purpose to maintain this high tradition. My husband and I take this opportunity of congratulating on your achievements and of expressing our good wishes for the welfare, happiness and prosperity of the people of Romsey.
And now onto the dais comes a young schoolgirl from Romsey, a very gracious curtsy as she brings a bouquet and presents it to Her Majesty. Another gracious curtsy, and down the red-covered steps she goes. And that was the Mayor of Romsey calling for 3 cheers for the royal guests. It was, too, something which was quite spontaneous and wasn't on the program. And now, as I look down over the square, the royal party moved from the dais down the steps into the council chamber behind them to see a civic exhibition. It's an exhibition of the town's treasures, including the charter that's being celebrated here today, a charter which gave a great degree of self-government to this little town. Or as the charter itself put it 350 years ago, since Romsey is an exceedingly old and populous town, and so that it may be a town of peace, a terror to the wicked, and a reward to the good, we concede that the town shall be forever a free town of itself. Well, yesterday, John Arlott visited the exhibition, and for his impressions of it, over to him now on the roof of the Abbey.
It is indeed an impressive exhibition of the history of a little piece of the old England. Her Majesty now will see a charter 350 years old. But this indeed was a town and a known town in that small First England which Alfred ruled from Winchester away there over the hill. It is one of those small country towns which belonged to Anglo-Saxon England, so that its crowd here was friendly. It pushed forward through the ropes in amiable fashion, not like a great unmanageable polyglot crowd, but just the people of a small country town. And Indeed, even older than that charter is, just across the way, King John's hunting lodge, from which most of the exhibits have been taken to the Town Hall exhibition, which Her Majesty is looking at now. This, perhaps, is the most impressive part of Romsey. It was one of the first two-story houses, mark you, ever to be built in Britain. It even had glass windows, in the days when glass was so rare that the glass used to be brought down when His Majesty was coming to the lodge and put in the windows and then taken away. But I think there can be no more moving piece of history than that which is scratched on the plaster of this old lodge. And remember that for 400 or 500 years the lodge was lost. It was just one of a little cluster of cottages that had been built onto at both ends, and it wasn't until 1927, in the course of decoration, that it was found to be this ancient hunting lodge. Well, the walls were stripped, and there came this amazing facet of history, scratched, not written, scratched in the plaster by knights in the time of Edward I, where these quite amazing little mottos, sometimes their family crest, but even more movingly, the little texts. They didn't write their initials, just their crests, and they didn't write jokes, but such things as, Godwam I shall me tryst, God in whom I shall put my trust. Christ me assay law, Christ is enough learning for me. And these words were written, it's quite moving to think, all those hundreds of years ago, and have just been uncovered as part of the history of this ancient town. And now down as our present link come the band of the 1st Battalion of the Royal Hampshire Regiment in their blues, and drawn representatively from all the battalions of the regiment, including the 1st, most of which of course is in Germany, the men of the Royal Hampshire Regiment who formed the Guard of Honour and are now spread amiably wide along the ropes there, standing very smartly, blue berets, khaki uniform, as the crowd waits for Her Majesty to come out from the exhibition. This town, of course, old as it is and long connected with the wool trade, is so old that King Alfred's father had his farm near here at Stanbridge, and it was King Alfred's son, Edward the Elder, who founded the first Benedictine nunnery here. That has grown, after destruction of the old wooden building, grown into what 16th century John Foster called this great sumptuous thing, a huge cruciform building made out of what we must call the local stone, quarr stone from the Isle of Wight, that was used to make the great cathedral at Winchester too, on which stands solid, foursquare and weathered, so that I lean against it now, and under the sun it's warm and comforting as ever. This great sumptuous thing. And it has its very human part in the history of Romsey, in that at the dissolution of the monasteries, King Henry VIII sold the abbey to the people of Romsey for £100, and downstairs in the vestry, alongside that magnificent Romsey breviary, the Romsey Psalter, is the receipt, a receipt to the people of Romsey for £100 for the sale of this great abbey. Now, as I stand here on the parapet, this quiet, friendly crowd, gay and easy under the sun, and waiting quite patiently and quite happily for the royal procession to come down this tiny route, along the streets with the old names, Church Place, the 100, down from the marketplace with its statue of the 3rd Lord Palmerston, Prime Minister of Great Britain, and resident then at Broadlands. As they wait patiently, down under my feet, Prebendary Martin Wilson is in the cathedral, and he'll tell you now, I fancy, about the order of service there. So over to Martin Wilson in the Triforium.
In a few minutes' time, Her Majesty the Queen and His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh
will be met at the great north porch of the cathedral by the Lord Bishop of Winchester and by the Vicar of Romsey. And they'll be led by the choir up through the great Norman nave to their places, the Broadlands pew, which is in the chancel. And there they will be very near indeed to the site of the first little wood and wattle church which started the history of Romsey. It was started, as you heard, by one of the Queen's royal predecessors, Edward the Elder. From his capital city of Winchester, the capital of Wessex, he decided to found a nunnery on this island site a few miles to the southwest. He was the son and successor of Alfred the Great. The nunnery he founded here in the year 907, 3 times 350 years ago. And where this great sumptuous thing, as we heard the abbey was described in the Middle Ages, now stands, there was just, in the first place, a little collection of huts and that little mud and wattle church. Very soon, in those times, the Danes made another raid up the Solent. The nuns had to flee for their lives to the capital city of Winchester, and their little community, their little church, was wiped to the ground. But back they came when the trouble was over, and a stone Saxon church, the predecessor of this present great building, was built on this same spot. There are relics of that to be seen. Under the floor of the nave you can see some of the foundations, and in 2 other places, one outside and one in, there are superb examples of Saxon craftsmanship, beautiful crucifixes showing the risen Christ reigning from the cross. Christian worship, then, has been offered on this site where the Queen is to worship this morning for over 1,000 years. The nuns founded a school, and here the young Saxon princesses came, some as scholars, others to become members of the community. One of them was Ethelfleda, one of the first abbesses, and the abbey recalls her wise rule and her saintly life in its dedication, for it is the abbey church of St. Mary the Virgin and St. Ethelfleda. Another Saxon princess who went to school here was Matilda, who married the Norman king Henry I. This marriage sealed the reconciliation between the Norman and the Anglo-Saxon peoples of this island. And it was in gratitude for this, and as a gracious tribute to his queen, that Henry I set about the rebuilding of this great church. And the congregation assembled here this morning to worship with Her Majesty sees it very much as it left the hands of its Norman builders. It is a great medieval abbey church, but here there's none of that feeling that its great days are in the past. When the nunnery was closed at the time of the Reformation, the townspeople who'd worshipped in the north aisle of the nave all through the Middle Ages, as you heard, they bought the church themselves, bought it for £100. Well, in those days, £100 was worth 3,500 as it would be today. But what they so acquired, they cared for. They've been worthy custodians of the great treasure which came into their hands. And today Romsey Abbey stands as a church complete in the beauty of holiness. Its services are marked by a beauty and order and reverence which are a model of what such things should be. The sanctuary and the 7 side chapels have been restored and finely furnished. And above the high altar is a splendid example of modern work, a contribution of the 20th century to the glory that is Romsey, a bas-relief of the Virgin and Child by Martin Travers. So from the past, the people of Romsey have inherited one of the most glorious parish churches in England. Many examples of the beautiful craftsmanship of the Saxon and Norman architects and craftsmen. And they, in these days, are seeing to it that this heritage is handed on, not only unimpaired, but enriched. This is a living place of worship, not just an architectural gem, and worshippers and sightseers alike are held by the atmosphere of reverence and beauty that's here. The Abbey remains what it was at the very beginning, at the heart of the life of the town. And as Her Majesty the Queen comes to join the townsfolk in their thanksgiving, she'll be in one of the finest buildings of the Church of England, where Christian worship is offered in the highest traditions of English churchmanship. And so, as we wait here in the Abbey for the arrival of the Queen, we hand you back now to Tom Salmon in Bank House.
Well, here in Bank House, overlooking the marketplace, we're still waiting for the civic procession to form up. As I look out of this window, across the crowds of people waiting here, look down, in fact, through the hundreds, that's the main street of Romsey, I can still see the faint wisps of smoke from that roasting ox. It's an ox, I believe, which weighs 1,000 pounds, and it's being roasted by a gentleman from Faversham in Kent, who's come down specially to do the job. He's an expert in these matters, and apparently last night he roasted a suckling pig, almost as it were to get his hand in. Well, that ox will be roasting all day here, and then tonight, back here again in the marketplace, it will be eaten by the people of Romsey. Some of the people have left the square now. I imagine they've gone to line the route to the Abbey itself, but there are still many here waiting for the civic procession, a procession which will be joined by Her Majesty and the Duke to attend the service of Thanksgiving that you've been hearing about in the Abbey. And of course, Her Majesty and the Duke come here to Romsey today, not as strangers, but almost as old friends. It is their first official visit to the town since the Queen's accession to the throne, but they visited Broadlands many times in the past, and often they've attended services in the Abbey. So they will attend service this morning in an Abbey church that they know well. And now the civic procession begins to form up. The representatives come out of the town hall, and they will represent all the towns, the main towns of Hampshire, Winchester, Southampton, Portsmouth, Bournemouth, even places beyond the borders of Hampshire too, because the Mayor and Mayoress of Salisbury are here, and there are also representatives from Poole. There are representatives too from Eastleigh, Aldershot, Gosport, Andover, Christchurch, Basingstoke, and Lymington. Now they walk out to take their places in a channel almost between the crowds of people still in the square. The sun, the spring sun, almost, it looks from here as though it could be midsummer. The spring sun shining on the gold maces and on the gold chains, the scarlet robes of the mayors as they wait to walk to the Abbey. Also in the procession will be representatives of the county council and of the local magistrates, all come to join in these celebrations here today, to join in the celebrations of Romsey's Day. They're being marshalled now alongside the statue of Lord Palmerston here in the square, while Her Majesty and the Duke are still inside the council chamber looking at the fascinating exhibits in the civic exhibition. All the windows in the houses, the red brick and whitewashed houses around this square are filled with spectators, and just opposite me in the post office, special provision has been made for a number of spastic children from the Southampton area. They came very early this morning. They were taken up to one of the windows of the post office so that they could get an uninterrupted view of Her Majesty and the Duke. Well, still, from the door of the council chamber, the procession grows. The members of the Guard of Honor, which dispersed after the main part of the ceremony here in the market square, are now lining the route, their arms at the present. Down below in the square, many children, many Union Jacks, all waiting to greet once more Her Majesty and the Duke. Well, many of these people, as I told you, I fancy must have made their way towards the Abbey itself. So let's go over now for a moment until the procession begins to leave here. Over now for a moment to the tower once more, to John Arlott.
Indeed, they have come down here, and they're lining the street behind the Guard of Honor, already presenting arms there. And one recalls yet again one of those little scratchings on the wall of the hunting lodge just across the way. As leal ye life, loyalty is life. And indeed, it is a loyal and friendly gathering. They've seen Her Majesty before here, of course, when she's come to her ordinary Sunday worship. But now, this is the great occasion, the day for the bunting and the flags, and a milliner's delight of ladies' new hats of every colour you can possibly imagine. And now you can probably hear, away in the distance, the cheers as Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh come out again into the square. The procession forms up with all those Hampshire mayors, mayoresses, and town clerks, and those too from foreign parts, Salisbury, Poole, coming to do this smallest of all those boroughs its special honour on its special day, its 350th birthday. And now here they are coming into Church Place, led by the mace bearer, the town officials, and as the royal procession moves down now to the Abbey door, into the Abbey, to the Triforium, to Martin Wilson.
And as you will imagine from what I was saying to you earlier about the conduct of worship in this great Abbey church, this is not going to be any kind of formal civic service, but something deeply founded in the Christian faith, with joy and thanksgiving, but also with humility, with the remembrance of the needs of others, with the hearing and the preaching of the Word of God. We start as the Queen is led to her place in the chancel with the great hymn, "All people that on earth do dwell, sing to the Lord with cheerful voice." That will be followed by the national anthem. There will be an act of humility following that, of penitence, and then of intercession, leading into the Lord's Prayer. The lesson from the epistle of St. Paul to the Ephesians will be read by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. The sermon will be preached by the Bishop of Winchester, and after that, a great act of thanksgiving and dedication before the high altar. And now, as the procession moves, as I can see through the windows, up to the north porch, the Bishop of Winchester and the Vicar of Romsey have gone out to meet Her Majesty and His Royal Highness. The choir, with a great processional cross at its head, stands attendant waiting in the nave to lead the royal party up to the chancel. and the trumpeters wait ready to sound a fanfare of greeting as the royal party comes into the church. The bells ring out from the tower in their greeting. Between the lesson and the sermon, the hymn will be another great hymn of praise. Praise the Lord, ye heavens, adore him. Praise him, angels in the height. And, as you may imagine, after the sermon, as a prelude to the climax of the whole service, the great act of thanksgiving, there will be the great hymn, Now Thank We All Our God, with hearts and hands and voices. And then the vicar and his people, the Queen and His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, among his congregation, will together give thanks for all the blessings bestowed upon Romsey down the years, and pray for God's grace to give their lives so that they may hand on a rich and enriched inheritance of civic and of spiritual life in this place. And now a hush falls upon the congregation. The trumpeters are ready for their fanfare of greeting.